The meeting began like every other Monday, fluorescent lights buzzing, coffee cooling on the table, and a slideshow repeating goals we had achieved months earlier. I sat quietly, listening as my work was presented by people who didn't understand a single line of the architecture behind it. When the CEO asked for comments, I gave a concise update: no jokes, no inflated enthusiasm, just facts. My manager frowned. He accused me of bringing down the team's emotional frequency, as if the network infrastructure that powered 3,400 stores depended on my facial expressions. He didn't ask about the new security protocols I had implemented over the weekend. He didn't mention the international rollout I had completed alone. He asked why I wasn't smiling. By noon, HR called me into a room decorated with posters about positivity and team spirit. They didn't mention performance. They didn't mention results. They repeated the same sentence: I was infecting the workspace with negativity. I asked for a single example of misconduct. They handed me a termination letter instead. No warning. No negotiation. My 14 years of service were reduced to a single expression on a Monday morning. As I packed my desk, the junior assigned to replace me snapped a selfie, grinning beside my empty chair, captioning it with a motivational quote about opportunities. The board applauded my departure publicly, claiming they had removed a barrier to company culture. The CEO gave a speech about energy alignment, implying that competence was secondary to enthusiasm. But no one noticed the silent weight of what they had done. They hadn't just fired an employee. They had dismissed the only person who understood the system beneath their empire and the compliance clause that bound it to me. Their smile cost them everything. My successor arrived with a smile so wide it could have been part of his uniform. He introduced himself as someone who thrives on good vibes and believed enthusiasm was a technical qualification. The team applauded his energy. He wore it like armor. Unfortunately for him and for the company, his confidence wasn't supported by comprehension. On his first day, he accessed the core server without authorization and began deleting system logs, believing they were old files cluttering the architecture. Those logs were the historical spine of every decision the system made. Without them, the network became blind. Within a week, he rewrote scripts I had refined over a decade, dismissing the testing environments as unnecessary bureaucracy. He ignored the fail-safe triggers that prevented data corruption, calling them negativity-based coding. His enthusiasm was so infectious that no one questioned why he bypassed every instruction manual I left behind. He viewed documentation as pessimism. He treated complexity like an insult. Then reality spoke. The first discrepancy was minor, a store reporting double inventory. The second was worse, freight expenses showing negative values. By the third week, entire distribution channels miscalculated tariffs, triggering alerts across international borders. Finance blamed logistics. Logistics blamed accounting. No one realized the system wasn't broken, it was confused. My architecture wasn't a collection of scripts. It was a living organism composed of financial logic, geographic dependencies, and legal compliance woven together like stained glass in a cathedral. Every part illuminated another. Remove one section, and the entire structure lost meaning. My replacement didn't understand that. He dismantled layers he never noticed, confident a smile could glue them back together. He didn't read the map. He didn't even know it existed. And the company was about to pay the price for mistaking optimism for expertise. The first warning arrived quietly. A regional warehouse reported that incoming shipments were marked as delivered before the trucks had even left the docks. Management dismissed it as human error. 2 days later, another branch claimed inventory was multiplying, items appearing in stock that had never been ordered. The executives blamed vendors for sloppy paperwork. They issued stern emails. They held briefings. They didn't listen. By the end of the second week, receipts clashed with physical counts. Shelves were full where the system showed shortages, and empty where the software insisted abundance. Financial officers accused store managers of manipulation. Store managers accused finance of incompetence. What no one questioned was the silent machine processing every transaction until it began refusing to process them at all. The third week forced their hand. Calculations for freight and tariffs began triggering alerts across multiple jurisdictions, threatening regulatory investigations. The same executives who once bragged about a frictionless global operation suddenly whispered about audits, lawsuits, and shareholder panic. When the system rejected the quarterly synchronization, a routine procedure, it wasn't a glitch. It was a verdict. The boardroom, once a stage for power displays, transformed into a war zone. Behind those glass walls, walls they once used to showcase strength, they now argued like frightened clients instead of leaders. Charts covered screens, voices cracked, and every sentence carried a tremor of fear. Someone suggested disaster recovery. Someone else asked who understood the architecture well enough to intervene. Silence followed. They could fire an employee. They had done that with enthusiasm. But they couldn't fire the consequences of that decision. They finally discovered a truth everyone learns too late. Systems don't respond to emotions, speeches, or positivity campaigns. They respond to competence. And competence had just walked out the door, with a smile they never saw. My contract was not extraordinary at first glance. It followed the usual legal templates: confidentiality, non-disclosure, performance evaluations. But buried deep, past the jargon, past the signatures, past the enthusiasm of a board eager to modernize, rested a single sentence that no one cared to question. To them, it was another technical formality. To me, it was insurance. Integrated systems require certified authorization for modifications. Unauthorized changes void liability. For 14 years, that sentence protected the company because I was the certified operator. My knowledge wasn't just practical, it was legally binding. Whenever I modified the infrastructure, I validated its integrity. HR, however, thought access removal was symbolic punishment, a gesture proving authority. They revoked my credentials within minutes of firing me, congratulating themselves as if deleting an account erased a career. What they unknowingly did was dissolve the only legal bridge between their systems and the world they operated in. From that moment, every input made by my replacement, every line of code, every updated configuration became unauthorized. And worse, every output the system produced was now without legal protection. Tariffs, invoices, financial statements, international freight schedules, each document relied on certified authorization. Without it, they were no longer compliant. They were liabilities. The board had celebrated my termination as a cultural victory. They framed it as removing negative energy. They never realized they had simultaneously removed the company's right to operate its own infrastructure. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't planned. It was the inevitable result of leadership that valued smiles over signatures. They believed they had fired a man. What they had truly done was break the legal spine of their empire. My absence didn't create chaos. Their ignorance simply activated the clause they had signed, without understanding the map it protected. The quarterly synchronization was routine, so ordinary that no executive ever attended it. It ran silently in the background, recalibrating databases across all 3,400 stores. For 14 years, it worked flawlessly. It was designed to confirm system integrity, validate authorized inputs, and recalibrate tax, freight, and compliance layers. It was the heartbeat of the company's infrastructure. And on that morning, at precisely 9 o'clock, it began to beat without its certified keeper. The system scanned the architecture, line by line, comparing every modification with its registry of authorized signatures. It found none. Script rewrites, deleted logs, new processes operating with no provenance. In the language of machines, it had been violated. My safeguards activated, not out of vengeance, but out of design. A system without a certified operator cannot be trusted, and a system that cannot be trusted cannot operate. At 9:04, the network severed ties with headquarters. Inventory databases disconnected from regional servers. Store registers attempted to authenticate, but were rejected. Payment gateways shut down. At 9:07, loyalty programs suspended themselves, unable to verify customer profiles. Employees stared at screens that offered no instructions, only errors. By 9:10, silence spread like smoke. Cashiers stood motionless beside frozen terminals. Managers held phones to their ears, listening to corporate support lines that had no answers. Delivery trucks halted mid-route because dispatch confirmations failed. Customers left full carts behind. Some stores locked their doors. No explosions. No sparks. No alarms. Just a 10-minute countdown that transformed a billion-dollar operation into 3,400 disconnected buildings, perfectly stocked, perfectly lit, and perfectly useless. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't revenge. It was a simple principle playing out in real time. Remove the architect, and the cathedral remains standing until the lights go out. The first wave of chaos began in the aisles. Customers who had spent years trusting a frictionless shopping experience suddenly found themselves unable to pay. Registers froze mid-transaction, trapping bank cards and receipts inside machines that refused to respond. Some demanded refunds. Others filmed the confusion and posted it online. Within hours, the videos went viral, each clip a public reminder that a brand built on convenience had lost control of its own backbone. Outside, delivery trucks sat stalled in parking lots, engines idling, waiting for confirmations that never arrived. Drivers held manifests with no digital counterpart, unable to unload goods without authorization. Perishables spoiled. Contracts were breached. Regional directors, once content to issue memos from polished offices, marched into headquarters demanding answers. Their voices echoed down the hallways where employees once recited positivity slogans. Now, no one smiled. The press caught wind of the collapse. Headlines didn't mention energy alignment or workplace negativity. They questioned leadership, competence, and compliance failures. Every article pulled the same thread. How had a corporation this large forgotten to secure its own systems? The CEO, who once lectured staff about smiling more, suddenly went on leave, the corporate phrase for disappearing before accountability arrives. And then came the investors. They didn't care about morale, culture, or optimism. They asked for numbers, solutions, and certified expertise. Shares plunged. Calls went unanswered. Meetings dissolved into panic. The executives who once mocked my seriousness now whispered my name like a prayer, hoping someone had my phone number, hoping I would return, hoping the person they dismissed for not smiling could save them from the consequences of their own grin. They didn't need positivity anymore. They needed competence. And competence was no longer sitting in their building. The first message arrived on a Tuesday morning. It wasn't an apology, it was an invitation. They framed it as a collaboration opportunity, claiming they valued my unique insights and wanted my positive contribution to rebuilding the culture. They spoke like nothing had happened, as if I had simply stepped out for coffee and forgotten to return. I ignored it. By Wednesday, the tone changed. The email subject lines shifted from enthusiasm to desperation. They offer consulting fees that would have impressed a junior executive, then doubled them before I had even replied. They called it strategic compensation, refusing to use the word crisis, though every minute the system remained frozen cost them more than my entire career's earnings. Thursday brought the first phone call from a board member who once avoided direct eye contact with anyone below vice president. He used phrases like mutual benefit and shared history, pretending we were old friends. Another executive followed, offering a return to my previous position with expanded responsibilities. They didn't realize that titles meant nothing without respect. I declined politely. By Friday, panic replaced diplomacy. They offered a leadership role, something the CEO had sworn I was not emotionally aligned for. Suddenly, emotions no longer mattered. Results did. They begged for a meeting. They needed the system online before the quarterly audit. They spoke quickly, as if speed could replace competence. I didn't argue. I didn't mention the humiliation, the forced exit, or the smile they tried to amputate from my dignity. I sent a single document, an invoice, 1 hour of diagnostics priced higher than my previous annual salary. No explanation. No commentary. Just numbers. Silence followed. It wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of realization settling in. Enthusiasm may fill a room, but only expertise keeps the lights on. I want you please to help me develop this part in 300 words exactly organized paragraphs full of events keep in consideration audience 37 plus, so don't make them feel bored, no repetition. Part 8. The revenge without a single insult, hammer ending. Today, I run a consultancy that teaches companies one lesson: smiles don't power servers. Skills do. They fired me for not being positive. They forgot that infrastructure doesn't care about emotions. In 10 minutes, their arrogance collapsed a $7.8 billion empire. I didn't break their system. I simply stopped protecting it. And now, I charge more per week than their CEO ever earned smiling. Today, my office isn't a cubicle hidden behind motivational posters. It's a consultancy tailored to companies that finally realize something their predecessors ignored. Technology doesn't respond to moods, slogans, or forced cheerfulness. It responds to competence. Executives now fly across continents to attend my workshops on system integrity and architectural resilience. They arrive dressed in confidence and leave humbled by the complexity they once assumed could be replaced with charisma. I don't pitch services. I am the service. I teach corporations why digital ecosystems fail, not because tools are weak, but because leaders forget that smiles don't power servers. They power egos. Servers run on logic, precision, and the quiet patience of someone who understands the gravity of every keystroke. My story has become a case study, not for drama, but for consequence. Meanwhile, the company that dismissed me for lacking positivity exists only as a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms. Former executives speak about the collapse in metaphors, avoiding the truth. Their downfall began the moment they confused facial expressions for competence. Their empire didn't implode because of sabotage. It crumbled because no one remained to shield them from their own ignorance. I never hacked the system. I never sabotaged a line of code. I simply stopped protecting it. Like a dam without a keeper, it failed under the weight of its own negligence. 10 minutes erased decades of expansion, partnerships, and profit forecasts. And now, I charge more in a single week than their smiling CEO earned in a month. Not because of revenge, but because the market finally values what they didn't: a mind that solves problems instead of decorating meetings. I never raised my voice, never insulted anyone, never needed to. Silence did the talking. Expertise delivered the ending.